Some truths don't reveal themselves in the moment they're born. Some truths wait. They wait in the shadows of old memories, in the corners of closed files, inside questions no one ever answered. And sometimes, when the grief is deep enough, those truths wait for the exact second a person finally gathers the strength to look. On an uneventful night in 2023, a mother in Atlanta opened her phone, thinking it would help her quiet the ache she carried for 7 years. It didn't, because the very first headline she saw stopped her world. She leaned forward, phone shaking in her hand, her breath caught halfway in her chest. The room around her faded. The clock ticked, but she couldn't hear it. Her mind went blank except for one thought. I've seen that name before. Her daughter's face flashed across her memory, smiling, alive, full of hope. Then came the day she buried her, the day officials insisted it was a tragic accident, the day she was forced to accept a story that never felt right, and now, right in front of her, was a name tied to everything she tried to live past. The same name she had quietly avoided for 7 long years. The same name she prayed would never show up in her life again. But there it was, and in that moment, alone in her kitchen, long after midnight, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel since 2016. This wasn't over. Her instincts stirred. Her doubts resurfaced. Her heart whispered the question she'd been scared to face. What really happened to my daughter on that ship? Tonight, we follow that question. We peel back the layers of a case smothered by paperwork, power, and silence. We trace the path of a young girl's last days, and the path a mother took when the truth finally reached her. This isn't just a story about death on a cruise ship. This is the moment a mother realized she could no longer run from the truth, because the truth had found her. Where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments. I love seeing how far this family reaches. Let's begin. Before anyone knew her name, before any headlines were written, before the questions that would haunt a family for years, there was simply a young girl getting ready for the trip she believed would shape the beginning of her adult life. Her name was Emma Carter, 18 years old, African American, born and raised in Atlanta, a girl who carried sunshine wherever she walked, the kind of daughter people talk about with pride. The kind of friend whose laugh made others feel lighter. The kind of student teachers remembered long after she graduated. Emma wasn't reckless or wild or chasing danger. She was chasing something far more innocent, freedom, a taste of the world she'd spent years dreaming about. Her father passed when she was 13, and life forced her to grow up faster than most. Her mother, Diane Carter, a longtime high school teacher, poured everything she had into raising Emma and her older son, Malek. They weren't wealthy, but they were close. The kind of close that comes from surviving storms together. Emma knew that. She appreciated that. And she wanted her mother to finally see her step into a new chapter. So for 2 years, she saved money, tutoring kids in her neighborhood, selling artwork online, working weekend shifts at a smoothie shop. Every dollar brought her closer to the goals she wrote about in her journal at 16. My first real trip will be somewhere beautiful, somewhere that feels like a beginning. When she found an affordable Mediterranean cruise, she didn't hesitate. The itinerary looked like magic. Rome, Athens, Barcelona, small islands scattered across turquoise water. A floating city promising sunsets, music, excitement, and the independence she had earned. Her mother worried, of course. Most parents do. But Emma wasn't careless. She was organized, detail-oriented, responsible. She researched everything: safety protocols, ship maps, emergency contacts. She printed copies of her passport, booked her excursions early, and planned to call her mother every night. This wasn't a reckless leap. It was a carefully planned dream. And in their living room, just days before the trip, Diane watched her daughter packing with the biggest smile she had seen since her husband died. There are moments parents remember forever. This was one of them. Emma folded her clothes neatly. She placed her journal on top of her suitcase. She said, "Mom, this is the start of everything." And for Diane, that sentence became a memory she couldn't let go of. Because the truth is, nothing about that moment hinted at the storm waiting ahead. Nothing suggested that the cruise Emma worked so hard for would be the last place she was ever seen alive. On the morning of June 12, 2016, Emma boarded that ship with excitement buzzing through her body. Videos on her phone show her smiling as she stepped onto the massive deck, hair blowing in the sea breeze, sunlight hitting her face. To her, it felt like the world was opening. To her family, it felt like she finally had a moment that belonged to her. And yet, somewhere on that same ship, someone else boarded with very different intentions. Someone older, someone powerful, someone who had lived a life Emma knew nothing about. Two paths, two lives, one ship. They had never met. They didn't know each other existed. But within days, their fates would collide in a way no one imagined. And everything Emma believed was waiting for her on that trip, adventure, independence, a fresh start, would be replaced by a question that would torment her family for nearly a decade. What happened on that ship? To understand the weight of what was lost, you have to understand who Emma was. Not the victim from a headline, not the girl reduced to a case file, but the person she was when the world still made sense. On that cruise during those first hours, she was exactly who she had always been. Bright, hopeful, open-hearted. She wasn't chasing attention or danger. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was doing exactly what she had told her mother she wanted to do. "Mom, I just want to enjoy being young for once." And for the first day, that's all she did. She explored every floor of the ship, texting Malik pictures of the water, sending her mother a short video of the sunset. She bought a small blue bracelet from the ship's boutique because it looked like vacation. She attended a safety briefing, made polite conversation with other passengers, and sat on the top deck with her journal open, writing about the thrill of seeing the world on her own terms. She was happy, genuinely happy, the kind of happiness people search for their entire lives. This trip wasn't just a vacation, it marked the end of a long, difficult chapter. Emma had spent years helping her mother keep the household together after her father's death. Her childhood ended early. She stepped into responsibility long before she was ready, long before most teenagers understood what real loss felt like. But she never complained. She never resented it. She poured love into her family the same way they poured love into her. Her teachers remembered her as the girl who stayed after class to help them pack materials. Her friends remembered her as the one who checked on everyone else, even when she was hurting. Her brother remembered her as the glue that kept their home from feeling empty. And her mother remembered her as the last piece of joy she had left after losing her husband. Emma was more than promising. She was becoming. She talked about studying marine biology one week and photography the next. Some days she wanted to travel, other days she wanted to teach. She didn't have it all figured out, but she had time and a world full of possibilities waiting. That's what makes this story so heavy. Because when Emma boarded that cruise, the people who loved her most were cheering for her, praying she would finally get a moment that belonged to her. They believed she deserved it after everything she'd carried. They believed she would come home with memories, pictures, and stories. They believed she would come home. And while she was on that ship, doing nothing more than enjoying a dream she had worked so hard for, her mother kept her phone close, checking it every hour, smiling at every update. Diane sent her messages like, "Drink enough water. Take pictures for me. Text me when you're back in your room." Not because she feared something extreme, but because she was a mother who finally let her child explore the world without her. A mother proud of her daughter's courage. A mother who believed she had nothing to fear except missing her too much. Emma didn't know that somewhere else on that same ship, a man with unimaginable power was moving through exclusive spaces she didn't even know existed. Their lives had not crossed yet. Their stories had not touched. But they would. And when they did, the life Emma was building, one step, one dream, one sacrifice at a time, would be shattered in a way no one saw coming. Every tragedy has a moment when the air changes, so quietly that only hindsight makes it clear. A moment when something small, something easily dismissed, whispers that danger has entered the room. For Emma, that moment came on the second night of the cruise. The ship was beautiful, lights glowing across the water, music drifting from the pool deck, travelers laughing over dinner. But behind that cheerful noise, the vessel carried a strange heaviness that Emma couldn't quite explain. It started with the way some crew members watched certain passengers, then quickly looked away. It continued with areas of the ship that were marked authorized personnel only, but seemed to have people entering who didn't work there. And it grew stronger when she walked past a private lounge and saw two security men standing outside. Not the ship's security, but hired guards in tailored clothing who didn't blend in with anyone else. Emma noticed. She always noticed things, but she didn't think she was in danger. Not yet. She assumed it was normal on a ship hosting wealthy travelers. Still, the atmosphere felt different from the first day. A little colder, a little unfamiliar. Later that night, she sent Malik a message saying the ship felt larger at night, as if its size became overwhelming once the sun went down. She laughed about it in the text, added emojis, made it seem lighthearted. But the video she recorded shortly after told a different story. She filmed the ocean from the railing, waves hitting the hull, lights reflecting off the dark water. Her voice was soft, as if she didn't want others to hear her. And when the camera briefly turned toward her face, she wasn't smiling. Her eyes looked unsure, almost as if she felt someone behind her, almost as if she was trying to convince herself she was overthinking. Emma wasn't paranoid. She was perceptive. She had been raised by a cautious mother. She trusted her instincts. And something about the ship's second night felt off. Another early clue came from a simple moment at the buffet on Deck 9. Emma was filling her plate when she felt someone staring. Not casually, not the way strangers glance at one another, but with a steady, focused attention that made her shoulders tense. She turned. A man in an expensive suit looked away just in time. Not embarrassed, not startled, just inconvenienced at being caught. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know his name. But other passengers seemed to step aside to make room for him as he moved through the crowd. Emma didn't linger. She took her plate and left quickly. Again, nothing dramatic, nothing obvious enough to call home about. Just a moment that made her chest tighten, then loosen again when she reached her cabin. But those small moments, the glances, the silence, the shift in the ship's energy, were not coincidences. They were warnings. Subtle at first, easy to overlook, easy to dismiss as imagination, and yet, when her mother watched these same clips months later, long after the trip ended, she noticed the same changes in her daughter's expressions, the same quiet unease that no one recognized at the time. Emma had no way of knowing that a man on that ship, someone with the power to erase entire stories, had taken notice of her too. Their paths had not collided yet, but the distance between them was shrinking, and as the ship sailed deeper into the Mediterranean, the sense of freedom Emma felt on day one slowly began to fade. Something was coming, something she didn't see, something she couldn't prepare for, and the fear she brushed aside that night would be the beginning of a nightmare she never imagined she'd step into. By the third evening of the cruise, the ship had settled into its usual rhythm. Live music spilled through the corridors. Passengers danced, laughed, posed for photos, and drifted between bars without a second thought. But beneath the celebration, a different kind of movement was happening. Quiet, purposeful, designed to go unnoticed. It began when a private entourage entered the upper deck lounge. Men in tailored clothing, speaking in low voices, clearing the area without saying a word. Staff stepped aside the moment they approached. Some lowered their eyes. Others kept walking, pretending not to notice. And then he walked in. Sheikh Kamir al-Rahman. To most passengers, he looked like any other high-ranking businessman enjoying a luxury vacation. But to those who knew who he was and what he was capable of, his presence carried weight. Money, status, protection, all orbiting around him like armor. He didn't blend in. He didn't need to. Where he went, space opened. Where he stood, people adjusted themselves without being told. He moved with the ease of someone who understood power and the silence it created. Emma wasn't in the lounge. She didn't know he was there. She was on the deck below, taking photos for her mother, capturing the night sky over the Mediterranean. But fate doesn't always arrive in grand moments. Sometimes it arrives in a single ordinary step. At 9:42 p.m., Emma walked toward the central staircase, a well-lit, crowded area. She planned to visit the onboard art gallery before returning to her cabin. At that exact minute, Sheikh Kamir's entourage exited the private lounge above, preparing to move toward a restricted section of the ship. They met in the middle. Emma didn't see him at first. She was adjusting her camera strap, distracted, mind drifting harmlessly. But when she looked up, he was already watching her. Not out of curiosity, not out of politeness, but with a calm, measured interest that made the air between them shift. She stepped aside instinctively to let the group pass. And then, one of Sheikh Kamir's security men stopped walking. For a moment, no one spoke. No one moved. Emma offered a small, polite smile, something she did without thinking, something she used to calm awkward situations. She didn't know that this simple gesture would be the start of everything that followed. Kamir's eyes stayed on her, not long enough to draw attention, but long enough that Emma felt it. A faint discomfort, a quiet question rising in her chest, a sense that she needed to walk away. She did. She turned down the corridor, footsteps quickening slightly, even though she didn't fully understand why her body reacted the way it did. What she didn't see, what no passenger saw, was the brief exchange between Kamir and his head of security. A nod, subtle, deliberate. Acknowledged immediately. From that point on, Emma was not just another girl on the ship. She was someone he had taken notice of. That night, she recorded a short video for her mother, smiling, tired, excited for the next day's excursion. There was nothing in her voice that sounded afraid, but small things hinted at unease. She double-checked her cabin door before sleeping. She texted her brother later than usual. She kept her hallway light on. Tiny behaviors most people would overlook, but ones that carried meaning once the full story came to light. Because the encounter on that staircase, quick, quiet, easily forgettable, was not forgettable to him. And long after Emma returned to her cabin, Kamir remained awake, reviewing passenger photos, asking questions his staff knew not to challenge, using influence the average traveler would never understand. Emma had brushed off the discomfort from that brief moment, but the man she crossed paths with did not. And the ship, beautiful, bright, filled with celebration, began to feel smaller, tighter, less safe than it seemed the day she boarded. The first threads of danger were pulling toward her. She just couldn't see them yet. June 15th, 2016, the fourth night of the cruise. A night Emma should have remembered for the music, the ocean breeze, and the excitement of exploring a new city the next morning. But the ship felt different, subtly, quietly, unmistakably different. Passengers partied across the decks. Bartenders poured drinks in rapid rhythm. Laughter rose through the warm night air. But underneath the noise, something else was happening. Movements that didn't belong to the celebration. People who weren't there to enjoy the cruise. Eyes following patterns, not party lights. And Emma, bright, trusting, focused on capturing memories, was unaware that the space around her had begun to shift. She spent most of the evening alone, walking the open deck with her camera. At 10:03 p.m., she texted her mother a photo of the horizon, saying she wished her mom could see it with her. At 10:17, she bought a small souvenir necklace from the gift shop. At 10:29, she was seen near the main pool, talking briefly with another group of travelers. At 10:41, she left to return to her cabin for the night. Everything about her behavior was normal, routine, predictable. But security footage, what was left of it, showed something else. At 10:43, two of Sheikh Kamir al-Rahman's private guards stepped into the same corridor Emma walked down. At 10:48, Kamir himself exited a restricted lounge and began moving toward the lower deck. These movements weren't coordinated by accident. They were intentional. The timing, the route, the shift in entourage positions, Everything pointed to purpose. Emma didn't know that a powerful man was tracking her path through the ship. She didn't know he had reviewed passenger lists. She didn't know she had been placed on his private radar. She only felt that the hallway seemed quieter than usual as she made her way toward her cabin. Too quiet. No passengers passing by. No crew members cleaning. Just her footsteps, echoing slightly more than they did the nights before. A detail so small she didn't even think to mention it in the final voice memo she sent her brother later that evening. A short message saying she was tired and excited for the next day's excursion. She sounded fine. She sounded safe. But outside her cabin, the atmosphere had changed. Around 11:02 p.m., a crew member later told investigators he noticed two unfamiliar men standing near the stairwell close to Emma's hallway. When asked why he didn't report it, he admitted he didn't want to interfere with important people. That phrase became significant later. Very significant. At 11:10 p.m., Emma left her cabin to get a bottle of water from the vending machine. It was a short walk, less than 40 seconds. But that walk placed her in the one area of the ship where cameras mysteriously had maintenance issues that night. The footage went black at 11:12 p.m., exactly when she passed through. At 11:14 p.m., a passenger in the adjoining hallway reported hearing a thud. Not loud, not alarming, just enough to make him pause. He later told investigators he dismissed it as someone dropping luggage. At 11:19 p.m., another crew member noticed the same two private guards from earlier heading toward a restricted section of the ship. At 11:23 p.m., Kamir's private lounge, normally dark at that hour, had its lights turned on. And at 11:26 p.m., Emma's phone activity stopped. No messages, no photos, no calls. Silence. Passengers kept dancing. Bartenders kept serving. Music played across the deck. The ship kept moving through the black water. But somewhere inside that massive vessel, a moment unfolded that would change everything. A moment Emma never returned from. A moment the ship would later claim no one witnessed. A moment powerful people hoped would quietly disappear. Before we continue, I just want to say, if you're still here listening to this story, thank you. This is a new channel. And honestly, every view, every subscription means everything. It tells me their stories matter to you the way they matter to me. So if you're enjoying this, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, all right? Let's get back to it. The night Emma Carter was last seen alive wasn't marked by chaos. It was marked by quiet movements, sudden darkness on the cameras, and a young girl walking into a space she didn't know had already been compromised. The celebration continued for everyone else. But for Emma, the walls of that ship had begun to close. Her world had shifted, and the danger she didn't know she was in was now just steps behind her. The official timeline claimed nothing unusual happened on the fourth night of the cruise. According to the ship's report, passengers partied, slept, or relaxed, just like every other evening. But the truth lived in the gaps. Gaps nobody explained. Gaps that were only noticed once it was too late. And the largest gap of all began at 11:12 p.m., the moment the hallway cameras went dark. No warning, no technical alert, no maintenance request logged, just darkness. The ship, with over 3,000 passengers on board, suddenly had blind spots in the exact places Emma walked through minutes earlier. When investigators later tried to recover the missing footage, they found corrupted files, overwritten sequences, and a trail of digital interference that did not match normal equipment failure. It suggested intention, preparation, control, but on the night itself, none of that was visible. Here is what was known. At 11:14 p.m., a faint sound was heard in the restricted corridor adjacent to the vending area. Nothing explosive, nothing chaotic. Just a brief interruption in a quiet hallway. At 11:16 p.m., a passenger walking 2 floors above reported seeing a man in a dark suit escorting someone toward a private stairwell. He described the movement as urgent but quiet, the way people walk when they don't want to draw attention. He didn't recognize the man. He didn't think to report it, not until the news broke days later. At 11:19 p.m., a crew member cleaning on Deck 8 saw 2 private guards, guards he knew didn't work for the ship, walking briskly in the direction of the unmarked suites. He later admitted he kept his distance. He felt he wasn't supposed to notice them. He feared losing his job if he asked questions, and that fear kept him silent on the one night his voice might have changed the course of this story. Inside one of those unmarked suites, lights came on around 11:23 p.m. This was an area passengers were not allowed to enter. The doors required coded access. The ship's staff had minimal control over who went in or out. This was the same section Kamir al-Rahman used when he didn't want to be seen, not just on this cruise, on others as well. The timeline continues with precision. At 11:24 p.m., Emma's phone disconnected from the ship's Wi-Fi. Not due to signal loss, not due to airplane mode. The device itself stopped responding. At 11:27 p.m., a noise complaint came from a passenger in a cabin near the private suites. He described hearing what he thought were raised voices and something hitting a surface. Security noted the complaint, but never followed up. At 11:32 p.m., two of Kamir's guards left the restricted wing carrying folded towels and a duffel bag. The towels were later unaccounted for. The bag was never found. At 11:36 p.m., the door to the suite opened one final time. Only one man stepped out. The guards did not accompany him. He walked with the confidence of someone who knew no one would question him, someone accustomed to privilege, someone who understood the power of silence. What happened inside that suite in the minutes between 11:23 and 11:36 was not written in the ship's official report. It was not documented by staff. It was not acknowledged by management. But medical examiners later confirmed that Emma's injuries did not match an accidental fall or a slip, or any event that lined up with the accidental drowning narrative pushed by the cruise line. They found signs of force, signs of struggle, signs that pointed to one reality. Emma Carter did not walk into danger. Danger walked toward her, and in those dark, undocumented minutes, her dream trip became the final night of her life. Later, much later, investigators identified 3 separate missing logs from that night. The security shift rotation, the hallway patrol notes, the access card registry for the restricted suites all cleared. All erased or redacted, all missing the exact time frame Emma disappeared. Accidents don't erase records. People do. When the ship docked the next morning, passengers woke to sunshine and announcements for upcoming tours. They packed their bags, ordered breakfast, prepared for a new day. But one cabin remained quiet, the door unopened, the bed untouched, and a young girl who should have walked off that ship with memories was nowhere to be found. Morning arrived like nothing had happened. The ship glided across calm water. Announcements echoed across the decks. Passengers lined up for breakfast, laughing about the night before. Housekeepers moved through the hallways with carts full of fresh linens. But on deck 6, something was off. A room attendant knocked on cabin 6214. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time, still nothing. Inside the cabin, the morning sunlight slipped through the blinds, landing on a neatly made bed, an untouched pair of sandals, and a small blue bracelet resting beside a folded shirt. Everything was in place. Everything was orderly. Everything looked exactly like Emma had left it the night before. Except she wasn't there. At first, the crew did what they always do when a passenger misses morning check-in. They radioed security. It was meant to be a simple welfare check. But this check was different. Security officers searched the surrounding hallways, the elevators, the dining area, the pool deck. No sign of her. Passengers who saw her the night before remembered her returning to her cabin. After that, nothing. By 10:45 a.m., a quiet tension began spreading among the crew. Not panic, just unease. At 11:03 a.m., 2 officers received a call from the lower deck. A body had been found. The official report claimed Emma was discovered floating near the ship's hull during a routine patrol. No explanation for how she got there. No witnesses, no alarm, no cries for help, just a body in the water. The announcement to passengers came 30 minutes later, phrased carefully, softly, almost rehearsed. A tragic incident occurred overnight. One of our guests suffered an accidental drowning. Activities on Deck 11 will be paused as a sign of respect. People froze mid-bite. Conversations stopped. Whispers spread. But the phrasing, accidental drowning, was used before authorities even examined her body, before any investigation began, before any questions were asked. The conclusion had been written immediately. Crew members later admitted the ship entered a strange state. Cleaners scrubbing areas that didn't need cleaning, supervisors speaking urgently behind closed doors, security officers escorting passengers away from certain sections. The atmosphere shifted fast, too fast. Within hours, the ship prepared a statement, a tragic, alcohol-related accident involving an 18-year-old girl. Emma had barely turned 18. She rarely drank. Her toxicology report hadn't even been done yet, but the narrative had already been chosen. When her body was examined on board, the notes were brief, shockingly brief. No mention of bruises, no mention of timeline inconsistencies, no mention of the missing footage, no mention of the private suites. It was as if the medical staff had been instructed to move quickly, very quickly. That afternoon, the ship's captain met privately with his senior officers. What was said in that room was never documented, but afterward the tone of the entire crew changed. One attendant remembered being told by a supervisor, "Keep your head down, focus on your tasks." No context, no explanation, just an instruction that carried weight. The cruise line reached out to U.S. officials within hours, reporting Emma's death as an accident. No suspicion of foul play, no need for further examination. The wording aligned perfectly with the early on-ship announcement. It was quick, too quick, efficient in a way that made later investigators uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Emma's belongings were packed neatly into a sealed box. Her journal, her camera, her clothes, her new bracelet, her phone, which staff reported as non-functional. That box would become the last tangible piece of her mother's world. When Diane received the call, she was at her kitchen table, the same place she would later discover the clue that changed everything. The voice on the phone was formal, gentle, practiced, the kind of tone used when delivering bad news with a script. She heard phrases like tragic accident, deepest condolences, no signs of foul play. She heard every word, but none of them made sense. Emma was a lifeguard in high school. Emma was careful. Emma didn't combine alcohol with swimming, ever. Nothing matched the daughter she knew. Yet the case was closed before she could even ask her first question. Passengers continued with the cruise. The ship sailed to its next destination. Entertainment resumed. Music returned. Laughs filled the corridors again. But for Emma's family, the world stopped completely. Her body was transferred, her belongings shipped home, her story stamped as an accident. And somewhere, quietly, efficiently, someone made sure the events of that night stayed exactly where they wanted them. Unquestioned, unchallenged, buried beneath the waves. The hours after Emma's death should have been the beginning of a transparent investigation. Interviews, evidence collection, chain of custody reports. Standard procedure for any unexpected fatality. But on that ship, those hours became something else entirely. A race to control the narrative, a race to shut down questions before they formed, a race to ensure the world never learned what truly happened during the hours the cameras went dark. And the people running that race were not grieving passengers, but individuals with access, authority, and deep financial influence. The very first sign was how quickly the cruise line removed Emma's section of the deck from public access. Not for safety, not for investigation, for cleaning. Next came the sudden appearance of executives who were not scheduled to be on the ship until the following week. They boarded discreetly during the next port stop, held a meeting behind locked doors, and left before most passengers knew anything unusual had happened. Staff later admitted that the conversation inside that meeting was not about Emma's life. It was about liability. Multiple departments were instructed to update their logs, not add information, update them. Hallway patrol charts were rewritten. Shift rotations were corrected. Security notes were shortened and replaced. One officer described the process as fixing the story before the story leaves the ship. The ship's doctor, who should have filed a thorough examination, completed only a brief document. No photos, incomplete vital records, no detailed analysis of her injuries. He marked the cause as probable drowning, no further comment. And within that same hour, the final medical report was stamped as closed. Meanwhile, something else unfolded behind the scenes. Kamir al-Rahman's private security team entered the medical bay before the ship's own investigators. They asked no questions. They gave no explanations. They simply requested access to the logs that listed who entered the restricted suites that night. Hours later, those logs disappeared. When internal IT attempted to retrieve the hallway surveillance files, they discovered that the cameras in the critical corridor had been tampered with, remotely. Not a malfunction, not a glitch, a deliberate override. The backup drive had been wiped the same night, and the timestamp for the wipe matched the moment Emma's phone stopped responding. At the senior level, the cruise company's risk management team instructed several crew members to prepare statements describing the incident as unfortunate but accidental. They were told this was standard protocol. They were told this prevented unnecessary panic. Some were even told this was for the family's peace. But one attendant later revealed that anyone who expressed doubts was subtly reassigned to new tasks, tasks far away from the areas under scrutiny. Silence was rewarded. Questions disappeared, and then came the financial trail. The week after Emma's death, several mid-level crew members received unusual deposits, performance bonuses that didn't match their rank or payroll cycle. When investigators traced those payments years later, they found the funds originated from a shell account connected to a private security firm with ties to Kamir al-Rahman. The company denied involvement. The security firm denied involvement. But the timing and the amounts told a different story. The truth wasn't just ignored, it was purchased. When the ship reached its next port, a representative from the cruise line personally handled the paperwork. He bypassed local police. He bypassed independent medical examiners. He bypassed anyone who might view the case without influence. He signed off on Emma's death as an accident. He ensured the body was transported quietly. He authorized the report that later reached Diane's hands. A 5-page document, short, clean, comforting on the surface, deceptive underneath. The words accidental drowning appeared 6 times. The words under investigation appeared 0. There was no reference to the missing footage, no mention of the restricted suite activity, no log of the crew statements that contradicted the timeline, no acknowledgement of the private guards moving through the hallways at the exact time Emma disappeared. Everything complicated was erased. Everything suspicious was replaced with phrases that sounded official, but hid the truth. By the time Emma's body reached U.S. soil, the story was already perfected. It had traveled across 3 countries, passed through 2 governments, and landed in her mother's hands as a polished, definitive report. A version of events written not to inform, but to close the door. For the cruise line, the case was resolved. For Kamir al-Rahman, the matter was forgotten. For the world, the incident vanished without a trace. But for Diane Carter, something refused to settle. A mother's instinct is powerful. And as she read the report, line by line, over and over, she felt something rising inside her. A quiet question, a persistent ache, a sense that the truth didn't match the child she raised. She didn't know it yet, but the cover-up she was reading would one day become the very thing that exposed everything. The weeks after Emma's death moved in slow motion. The world continued its normal rhythm, cars on the road, children laughing in schoolyards, neighbors mowing their lawns. But inside the Carter home, time felt frozen. Diane opened the front door one afternoon to see a small box left by the delivery driver. A simple cardboard box. No warning label. No note. Just her daughter's belongings. Returned from the cruise. Inside were clothes folded by a stranger, a pair of sandals she had worn since high school, a seashell keychain bought the first day of the trip, and the blue bracelet Emma had purchased hours before she vanished. Diane touched the bracelet gently, as though it might break. She pressed it against her chest, and for the first time since the phone call, She let herself cry without holding back. Not the quiet tears she hid from her son, not the controlled sadness she showed to friends, but the kind of grief that takes a person to the floor. A sound no mother should ever make. Funeral arrangements blurred into a haze of paperwork, phone calls, casseroles from neighbors, and sympathetic voices that barely registered in her ears. People told her it wasn't her fault. People told her Emma lived a good life. People told her the accident was tragic, heartbreaking, unpredictable. But the word accident never sat right with her. Not because she needed someone to blame, but because she knew her daughter. She knew her habits, her instincts, her caution, her relationship with the ocean, her training as a lifeguard. None of it matched what she was being told. Still, she tried to trust the professionals. She tried to believe the paperwork. She tried to accept the version of events in front of her. Because what other choice did she have? After the funeral, family members flew back home. The house emptied. The calls slowed. The casseroles stopped coming. And that was when the silence arrived. The kind that settles into every corner. The kind that reminds you what's missing. The kind that turns a home into something unfamiliar. At night, Diane walked past Emma's bedroom door and lingered there. Sometimes she'd open it just to sit on the edge of the bed. Other times, she'd stand in the doorway, afraid to step inside because stepping inside meant the world had changed forever. The room smelled faintly of her daughter's perfume. Her notebooks were still on the desk. Her favorite hoodie hung on the chair. It felt wrong to touch anything. It felt wrong not to. The grief wasn't sharp. It was heavy, slow, suffocating, constant. Malik tried to be strong for his mother. He checked in, cooked meals, filled the house with small distractions, but he was grieving too. Some nights he would find Diane sitting alone at the dinner table, staring at the incident report with a highlighter in her hand, circling things she didn't understand. Not because she was looking for answers, but because she couldn't understand how an entire life could be reduced to 5 pages of vague statements. She carried that report everywhere, folded in her purse, tucked into her bedside drawer, placed beside her coffee mug when she couldn't sleep. Every line felt incomplete. Every phrase felt too polished. Every sentence felt like it was missing something important. Yet she told herself she had to let it go. She had to keep moving. She had to try. So she returned to teaching. Her first day back in the classroom, she greeted her students with a practiced smile. The kind teachers learn to wear even when their hearts are breaking. But behind that smile, something was different. Her voice trembled during roll call. Her hands shook when she wrote on the board. Her mind drifted constantly to the same mental picture. Emma stepping onto that ship, laughing, free, unaware of the danger waiting for her. Months turned into a year turned into 2. Birthdays passed, holidays passed, seasons changed, yet nothing inside Diane changed. Her daughter's absence was a shadow she carried everywhere. In the grocery store, during staff meetings, while grading papers, while lying awake at 3 in the morning. She joined online support groups for families who lost loved ones on cruise ships. She read story after story that sounded too familiar. She listened to parents who felt unanswered questions lingering beneath the official explanations. Those late-night conversations kept her going, not because they gave her closure, but because they told her she wasn't alone. Still, she never expected answers. She never expected justice. She never expected anything more than the quiet ache she woke up with every day. Until one night in 2023, when a single name on a screen brought all her doubt roaring back. A name she recognized immediately. A name she had seen once before. A name she had hoped to never see again. A name tied to the very place where her daughter spent her last night alive. The grief that held her silent for 7 years was about to ignite into something else. Something stronger, something determined, something unstoppable. 7 years passed. 7 long years of forcing herself to walk through each day with a wound that never truly closed. And then, on a quiet night in 2023, everything changed. It started the same way many of her nights began. Diane sitting alone at her dining table, her laptop open, the house silent except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. She wasn't searching for answers. She wasn't investigating anything. She wasn't expecting the past to rise. She was simply scrolling through a support group for families who'd lost loved ones on cruise ships, a place she visited whenever the ache in her chest grew too heavy. Then she saw it, a headline posted by another grieving parent. A wealthy businessman accused of assault during a private yacht trip. Usually stories like this were too painful for her to read. Usually she kept scrolling. But tonight, something made her stop. She clicked the article. And that's when the world around her faded. Because in the very first paragraph, in the middle of a lawsuit involving a woman from 2019, was a name she recognized instantly. A name that cut through 7 years of silence like a blade. Sheikh Kamir al-Rahman. The moment her eyes landed on it, her breath caught. Her hands trembled violently. Her heart slammed against her chest as if trying to warn her of something she couldn't yet understand. She whispered the name out loud, just to make sure she wasn't imagining it. But she wasn't. This was the same name printed discreetly on Emma's cruise passenger manifest 7 years earlier, a name she barely noticed at the time. Just another foreign traveler among hundreds. But now it wasn't just a name. It was a clue. A clue she didn't know she had been waiting for. A clue she didn't know she remembered. She opened Emma's belongings, the box she hadn't touched in years. The item she was looking for was there. The ship's itinerary, passenger list, brochures, safety materials. She unfolded the sheet with the names. There it was, printed clearly, unavoidable. Kamir al-Rahman, VIP guest, deck 12. Her pulse quickened. Her palms grew icy. Her voice cracked as she whispered to herself, "Please, no." Because the article she had just read wasn't about negligence. It wasn't about an accident. It was about a woman accusing the same man of violent assault on international waters. The patterns were painfully close, the locations too familiar, the timeline too perfect. But Diane didn't stop there. She went back to the support group and typed the name into the search bar. Threads appeared. Stories emerged. Whispers of settlements, women describing assaults on cruises, yachts, private islands. Different victims, different years, different countries. The same man. Her hands hovered over her laptop as she typed one more search. 2016 Mediterranean cruise incident. Photos from strangers appeared. Posts from passengers sharing memories from that trip. She clicked through them one by one, staring at every face, every background, every detail. Then she froze. In one picture, a group selfie taken on the third night, far behind the laughing crowd, barely visible, almost lost in the blur, was Emma, talking to a man whose face she now recognized. Sheikh Kamir al-Rahman. Her body went cold. Her throat tightened. Her eyes filled with tears she couldn't blink away. Emma never posted that picture. The crews never included it in their files. The ship never mentioned his name when she asked questions back then. But here he was, standing behind her daughter, close enough to speak to her, close enough to touch her, close enough to destroy her life. In that moment, the past and present collided. 7 years of buried instinct rushed back with brutal clarity. This was not coincidence. This was not random. This was not an accident. Something in Diane awakened. Something fierce, instinctive, unstoppable. The quiet mother who cried herself to sleep for 7 years became the woman who stood up from that table with fire in her chest. Her grief sharpened into purpose. Her doubt transformed into certainty. Her silence broke. For the first time since 2016, she said the words out loud. He was there. He saw her. He was with her. And in that single moment, Diane Carter stopped mourning. She started investigating. Once the shock settled, Diane didn't sit back down. She couldn't. The moment she saw that name, the moment she saw that photo of Emma standing near a man who should have never been near her, something inside her shifted permanently. For 7 years, she lived with questions she was told not to ask. For 7 years, she trusted the official report. For 7 years, she forced herself to believe that the pain was simply fate. But this wasn't fate. This was a pattern, and Diane was done being quiet. She started with the simplest step. She reread the cruise documents that came home in the box with Emma's belongings. This time, she read them like evidence, not like a grieving mother searching for comfort. She noticed things she never noticed before. The passenger manifest listed Kamir as a VIP guest, yet gave no cabin number. The section showing security escorts had names blacked out. The report said Emma was last seen near the upper pool deck, even though her cabin key card data placed her on deck 6 right before the cameras went dark. The incident timeline was too neat, too consistent, too perfectly aligned for a ship that claimed the cameras malfunctioned. Every detail felt rehearsed. Every line felt crafted. Every explanation felt too clean. She opened her laptop again, but this time, she didn't scroll aimlessly. She typed with purpose. Kamir al-Rahman cruise accusations, yacht assault settlements, international waters, legal loopholes. And slowly a disturbing picture formed. Different women, different years, different locations, but one identical pattern. Cruise ships, private yachts, isolated conditions, evidence that vanished, cases labeled as accidental, misunderstood, or unconfirmed. Victims paid to stay quiet or pressured to disappear from the narrative entirely. The more she searched, the more familiar the details felt. It was like looking at Emma's story through the eyes of strangers. Then she found something that shook her to the core. A lawsuit from 2017, just a year after Emma died. The victim's attorney had written that the man responsible used a team of private guards, the ability to shut down sections of a ship, and immediate access to top-tier legal resources. The same behaviors described on Emma's cruise. The same access, the same timing, the same tools used to bury the truth. Diane stared at the screen for a long time. Her hands were no longer shaking, her breathing no longer shallow. Her fear was gone. What replaced it was resolve. She began reaching out to people, privately, carefully, cautiously. First, she messaged the woman from the article. She didn't mention Emma right away. She simply asked if the accused had ever traveled on cruises before. The response was immediate. Yes, he prefers them. Her heart pounded. Next, she contacted 2 women who had anonymously posted their experiences on online forums. Days passed. One ignored her, the other replied. What she revealed mirrored Emma's timeline in unsettling ways. Isolated areas of the ship, security men who weren't ship employees, sudden camera failures, and pressure to accept a settlement that silenced everything. Diane realized she was not dealing with an isolated incident. She was dealing with a pattern powerful enough to stretch across borders. Still, she needed proof that connected her daughter to him. So she dug into public archives, passenger logs, maritime records, travel databases. She discovered that Sheikh Kamir boarded the same cruise Emma was on. He reserved a suite that did not appear on general ship maps. His departure from the vessel coincided with a sudden increase in private security personnel on board. His entourage's names were not listed in the official manifest. That was enough to raise alarm. But it wasn't enough for Diane. She wanted undeniable evidence. Evidence no one could rewrite. So she did something she had never done before. She began contacting passengers from the same cruise. She searched social media hashtags from 2016. She reached out to people who posted photos. She asked simple questions at first. Did you see anything unusual that night? Did you notice security presence? Do you remember a wealthy guest traveling with guards? Most ignored her. A few politely said no. But then, she found her. A young woman named Layla, another traveler who had taken a photo of the deck party where Emma appeared in the background. Layla agreed to talk. Over a video call, she told Diane something that made her sit completely still. I remember that man, the one in the background of my photo, the one who seemed important. He had guards following him. I always wondered why. That was the confirmation Diane needed. Not speculation, not coincidence, not theory. Confirmation. Her daughter had been in close proximity to a man accused by multiple women across different countries, and the cruise line never told her. Not once. Her grief sharpened into a new form, one built not from sadness, but from truth. Emma didn't drink herself into danger. Emma didn't wander recklessly. Emma didn't simply fall. Something happened, something intentional, something constructed. For the first time, Diane understood the magnitude of what she had stumbled into. This wasn't just about Emma. This was bigger, wider, deeper. It was about a pattern of silence, a history of buried evidence, a man shielded by money, influence, and fear, and a system designed to protect him. But he had overlooked one thing: a mother with 7 years of pain and nothing left to lose, and she was only getting started. The more Diane searched, the more impossible it became to ignore the truth forming in front of her. One detail alone could have been a coincidence. Two details could have been unfortunate timing. Three might have been bad luck. But what she found next was a structure, a pattern, a network of events connecting women who had never met across years and borders, all pointing toward one man. And once Diane stepped into that network, she realized something chilling. Emma's death was not an isolated tragedy. It was part of something much larger. It started with a single conversation. The second woman Diane reached out to, someone who traveled on a different cruise 3 years after Emma, finally agreed to talk. She spoke cautiously, voice trembling, insisting on anonymity. But her words were unmistakable. She described a night when she felt followed in the hallway, a night when cameras suddenly stopped working, a night when she woke up in a private medical room with no memory of how she got there. The signature details matched Emma's timeline far too closely. The guards, the restricted area, the missing footage, the sudden accident narrative. Different year, different ship, same man. Diane mapped everything out on her dining table. Locations, dates, ship names, victims' accounts, lawsuit filings, patterns in cruise itineraries, security arrangements, settlement rumors. And as she arranged the papers, the truth took shape. The assaults did not happen at random. They followed the same blueprint: international waters, ships registered in foreign countries, private lounges with limited oversight, cameras conveniently failing, victims isolated, evidence removed, silence purchased. It was a system, one he had perfected. Then she discovered something she hadn't expected. One of the women, a college student from Florida, had traveled on the same cruise as Emma. The exact week, the exact ship, the same deck party Emma was photographed in. Diane reached out. This woman didn't want to speak at first. Years of fear held her back. She had signed something, she said, a contract she was told would protect her privacy. But eventually, the silence cracked. She confirmed she had been assaulted by a man with private guards. She confirmed she received a cash settlement. She confirmed she was pressured not to report anything. And then she said something that made Diane's entire body go still. I saw another girl that night, a younger one. She looked scared. I always wished I had said something. That younger girl was Emma. The connection was now undeniable, but there was more. Diane dug into corporate records and found shell companies linked to cruise security contracts. These companies funneled payments to staff members during voyages that coincided with Kamir's travel dates. The same accounts appeared in a lawsuit in Monaco, a sealed report in Turkey, and court documents in the UAE, different countries. Same financial trails, same signatures. Then came the breakthrough. A European investigative journalist had published a small piece in 2018, mostly ignored, mentioning a wealthy Gulf businessman who routinely traveled with a personal security team that operated outside ship authority. He described unmarked cabins, private hallways, restricted elevators, and an ability to override certain ship systems. The journalist didn't reveal the name, but the description matched Sheikh Kamir's entourage precisely. Diane printed the article and placed it beside Emma's passenger list. Everything aligned. Next, she compared dates. Calmer traveled on. A Mediterranean cruise in 2016. A private yacht route near Greece in 2017. A luxury liner in the Indian Ocean in 2018. A Caribbean cruise in 2019. On each of those trips, someone filed a complaint. Someone went missing. Someone reported an assault. Someone accepted a settlement. The number kept growing. 3 women, then 5, then 8. Stories spread across different continents, yet carrying identical fingerprints. Different voices, same blueprint. Emma fit perfectly into the timeline. Too perfectly. For the first time in 7 years. Diane saw Emma's truth not as a tragedy, but as a piece of a larger puzzle. Emma had been part of a pattern so carefully orchestrated that most families believed the official reports. A pattern that thrived in silence, in fear, in paperwork designed to confuse and overwhelm grieving parents. But Diane was not overwhelmed. She was sharpening. She wasn't intimidated. She was learning. She wasn't grieving quietly anymore. She was connecting dots others hoped she'd never see. And when she stepped back from the table looking at the names, the maps, the dates, the photos, one truth stood in front of her. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't random. This wasn't an unfortunate event. This was a system of exploitation built on wealth, secrecy, and international loopholes. And her daughter got caught in it. Everything she uncovered pointed to one man with a history of slipping through the cracks, one man surrounded by silence, one man whose victims were scattered across oceans, and now Diane Carter was holding the evidence that connected them all. What she didn't know yet was just how far this web reached, and how dangerous it would become once she stepped deeper into it. For months, Diane gathered evidence in silence, carefully, methodically, painfully. She pieced together testimonies, articles, timelines, screenshots, financial records, and maps. She organized everything across her dining table, a table once used for family dinners, now transformed into a battlefield. And when she stepped back and looked at the entire picture, one truth became impossible to deny. Her daughter died on a ship that shielded a predator protected by money, influence, and a system designed to keep people like him untouchable. Most people would have stopped there. Most people would have been terrified. But Diane Carter was not most people. She was a mother with nothing left to lose. Her first move was bold, unexpected, unapologetic. She contacted the attorney involved in the most recent assault lawsuit, the one that triggered her discovery. She sent him an email with a subject line that read, "I believe my daughter was one of his victims." She expected a long wait. She expected uncertainty. The attorney called her within hours. During their first conversation, he listened quietly as she explained the timeline, the photo, the testimonies, and the missing footage. He asked questions she didn't know she needed to answer. He looked at the documents she had collected, and when he called her back later that week, his voice carried a seriousness that confirmed her fears. He told her, "You're not imagining this. There's a pattern here, and your daughter fits into it." That was the moment everything shifted, the moment Diane's grief became purpose. The attorney connected her with 2 investigators experienced in international maritime crimes, people who understood the loopholes that let predators operate freely at sea. They reviewed Emma's case file. They examined the cruise line's documents. They tracked down individuals who had worked on the ship that week, and every step confirmed the same thing. Too much was missing. Too much was altered. Too much was rewritten. One investigator told her bluntly, "This wasn't handled incorrectly, it was handled intentionally." Diane felt her stomach tighten, not with fear, but with certainty. Then came the decision, the one no grieving mother had ever been expected to make, the one powerful people counted on her being too broken to consider. She told the attorney, "I want to take him to court, not the cruise line, not mid-level employees, not the medical staff. Him, Sheikh Rahman, the man with a global empire, the man with private guards, the man whose name alone could intimidate governments." The attorney hesitated only for a moment before saying, "If you do this, be prepared. He will try to bury you." And Diane replied, "He already buried my daughter. I have nothing else for him to take." With that decision, the quiet woman from Atlanta stepped into an arena she was never meant to enter. Her lawsuit was filed publicly, not sealed, not anonymous, not quiet. It named him directly. It listed her evidence. It accused him of assault, cover-up, and involvement in the events surrounding Emma's death. And within 48 hours, the world noticed. News outlets picked up the story. True crime bloggers amplified it. Women's advocacy groups reached out. Social media erupted. Suddenly, survivors who had been silent for years saw someone challenging the man who terrified them. And something extraordinary happened. One by one, cautiously, fearfully, but bravely. Some whispered through phone calls. Some wrote long emails. Some sent recordings they had never shared before. A woman from Greece, a college student from Miami, a cruise employee from 2017, a traveler from Monaco. Different voices, different ages, different cultures. And yet, every story matched the pattern Diane had uncovered. Each woman had been pressured into silence. Each woman had been isolated. Each woman had been told no one would believe them against a man with that much power. But now, they believed each other. Diane's lawsuit ignited something unstoppable. The media that once ignored similar claims now wanted her story. Investigators reopened closed files. Advocacy groups began building pressure campaigns. And Kamir's legal team, known for their precision and aggression, realized something terrifying. For the first time, their client was facing a threat he couldn't buy, intimidate, or silence quickly. A mother, with evidence, with witnesses, with a network of survivors rallying behind her, and with a motive stronger than money, stronger than fear, stronger than any obstacle they could put in her path. She wasn't seeking wealth. She wasn't seeking attention. She wasn't seeking revenge. She was seeking truth. And that made her the most dangerous opponent they had ever faced. What Diane did next, refusing settlements, rejecting non-disclosure agreements, pushing forward even when the pressure intensified, was something no one anticipated. It wasn't just brave, it was unthinkable, and it was only the beginning. Once Diane filed her lawsuit, the story moved far beyond her kitchen table. It spilled into courtrooms, newsrooms, international headlines. It rattled corporate offices across continents. It forced powerful people to confront a truth they spent years avoiding. And for the first time in his life, Sheikh Kamir al-Rahman wasn't controlling the narrative. He was defending himself against it. His legal team responded immediately. They sent statements that sounded polished, confident, dismissive. They called the allegations misunderstandings, unverified, emotionally driven, and wildly inaccurate. They tried to discredit Diane gently at first, portraying her as a grieving mother misled by online speculation. But when they realized her case was built on documented proof, not emotion, not confusion, not assumptions, their strategy changed. They came after her harder. They dug into her past, her finances, her teaching career, her mental health records, her family history. They tried to find anything, any flaw, any weakness, any vulnerability that could make her fold. But they found nothing that could break her, because grief had already broken her long ago, and what remained was unshakable. Then the courtroom battle began. On one side, a mother in modest clothing, carrying a binder full of documents she printed at home, supported by an attorney who believed in her case. On the other side, rows of corporate lawyers in tailored suits, armed with decades of experience, complex legal strategies, and bottomless resources. But money and lawyers couldn't silence the facts. Piece by piece, the evidence Diane collected was entered into the record. The missing security footage. The access logs erased on the night Emma vanished. The photo of Emma speaking to Kamir. The testimonies from other women. The financial transfers to crew members. The identical patterns across multiple ships. The medical inconsistencies no one accounted for. The non-functional phone returned to the family. The sealed settlements from past cases. The journalist's investigative notes. And Emma's cabin timeline, the one that contradicted the ship's report. Each piece sharpened the picture. Each witness brought a new layer of truth. Each detail chipped away at a man who built his life on never being held accountable. Kamir's lawyers responded with force. They filed motions to dismiss. They argued jurisdiction. They weaponized international law. They tried to bury the court in paperwork. They petitioned to seal the proceedings. They offered settlements with numbers large enough to intimidate anyone. Anyone except Diane. She refused every offer, every NDA, every attempt to buy silence. Her refusal shook his entire legal team. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about revenge. This was about Emma. And they had no strategy prepared for a mother who wanted the truth more than relief. Then came the moment that shifted the case in her favor. A former cruise security employee who had remained silent for years stepped forward, anonymous at first, terrified but ready. He testified that during Emma's voyage, areas were cleared for private guests, surveillance systems were manually overridden, staff were instructed not to interfere with certain passengers, medical reports were sometimes amended before being filed. Crew members who asked questions were reassigned or pressured. His testimony aligned perfectly with the evidence Diane gathered. It aligned perfectly with the pattern she uncovered. And most importantly, it aligned perfectly with the timeline of Emma's last night alive. The courtroom fell silent as the pieces came together. For years, this man operated behind borders, policies, and loopholes. For years, women who tried to speak out were ignored, silenced, or paid to disappear. For years, accountability seemed unreachable. But now, in front of a judge, in front of the media, in front of a woman he underestimated, the truth was cornering him. Witness after witness confirmed what Diane already knew in her heart. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't confusion. It was a cover-up, a powerful one, a global one, a deliberate one. But Diane's persistence began unraveling it thread by thread. Every time his lawyers pushed back, she pressed forward. Every time they tried to overwhelm her, she answered with another piece of evidence. Every time they expected her to break, she grew more determined. Because she wasn't fighting for compensation. She was fighting for her daughter. And the billionaire who once moved through the world untouched was now sitting in a courtroom he never expected to enter. Because a school teacher refused to accept the version of events she was handed. The battle was far from over. But for the first time in 7 years, power was losing. And persistence, the quiet kind born from love, loss, and truth, was winning. After months of testimony, after endless motions, countless hearings, and attempts to delay or derail the case, the world finally reached the moment no one believed would ever come. The verdict, a packed courtroom, reporters shoulder to shoulder, advocates for survivors filling every seat. Security heightened, a long table of attorneys shifting papers they already knew weren't enough. And in the front row, Diane Carter sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the judge, breathing slowly through the weight of 7 years. She wasn't shaking now. She wasn't crying. She wasn't afraid. She was present, grounded, ready. Because no matter what the judge said, she had brought the truth into the light. The judge entered. The room fell silent. Even the air felt still. He reviewed the findings carefully, formally, unmistakably. Evidence altered, surveillance tampered, logs erased, patterns repeated across multiple countries, testimonies consistent, financial records pointing towards silencing efforts, medical reports incomplete and contradictory, and a timeline that aligned with a deliberate act, not an accident. He paused, looked at both sides, measured the gravity of what was about to be said. Then he delivered the words the world never expected to hear. Guilty. The room didn't gasp. It didn't erupt. It exhaled, a long, thick breath of release from survivors who had waited years to be believed, from journalists who followed leads that went nowhere, from advocates who feared this day would never arrive, and from a mother who carried the truth alone long before anyone listened. Kamir showed no visible reaction. His lawyer sat motionless. But behind those still expressions was the collapse of something enormous, a reputation, a network, a lifetime of untouchable privilege. The judge continued, detailing the sentence, the penalties, the restrictions, and the formal acknowledgement that the cover-up surrounding Emma's death was unjustifiable, intentional, and deeply disturbing. He referenced the witness testimonies, brave women who stepped forward despite fear. He referenced the erased logs. He referenced Diane's evidence, calling her work unusually thorough for a civilian. And then he said something no one expected from the bench. This case exists today because one mother refused to accept silence. Diane closed her eyes, not to cry, but to steady herself as her daughter's truth was finally spoken in a place of authority. The sentencing was severe, a long-term imprisonment with no early release, asset freezes pending further investigation, international travel restrictions for his entire team, orders to disclose past settlements, a mandate to reopen multiple maritime cases previously closed as accidents. For a man who once walked freely across borders, who shaped his world with wealth, who silenced people with a gesture, it was a fall almost impossible to comprehend. But for the victims, it wasn't enough to erase the pain, it was enough to validate it. As the courtroom emptied, survivors approached Diane quietly, some with tears, some with gratitude, all with relief. They thanked her, they hugged her, they told her she had done for them what no system ever did. She made the truth undeniable. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, headlines began forming in real time. But Diane didn't celebrate. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't raise her hands in victory. She walked down the steps with a calm dignity, clutching a single photo of Emma, the one from her 18th birthday, and whispered, "We did it, baby. We did it." Justice wasn't fast. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect. But it came. And it came because a mother refused to stop searching, long after everyone else stopped listening. When the verdict was announced, the courtroom moment echoed across the globe. But the true impact, the real legacy, didn't unfold in one day. It unfolded slowly in the months that followed. In boardrooms, government offices, advocacy groups, and families who finally found courage to speak. Because what began as a mother's lonely search for answers became something far larger than she ever imagined. The first ripple was in the cruise industry itself. Public pressure forced companies to confront flaws they had ignored for years. New regulations required independent oversight of onboard investigations. Ships now had to store surveillance backups in protected, tamper-proof databases. Medical staff were ordered to follow strict documentation protocols. Private guests with outside security teams faced new restrictions. Passenger deaths could no longer be closed as accidents without additional review. Maritime law, a system once known for loopholes and jurisdictional confusion, was dragged into the spotlight. For the first time, officials in multiple countries began negotiating clearer rules about crimes at sea. The case forced governments to address something families had been complaining about for decades. Emma's story gave those voices weight, but the largest ripple came from the survivors. In the weeks after the verdict, more women came forward. Not just from cruises, but from resorts, private clubs, high-profile gatherings, anywhere powerful men once felt immune from accountability. Many said the same thing. If that mother could do it, maybe I can too. Survivor networks grew. Advocacy organizations gained new funding. Journalists reopened cold cases that once seemed too dangerous to touch. The silence that protected people like Kamir for years began to crumble. And at the center of it all, quietly without seeking praise, was Diane. She never saw herself as a fighter. She never wanted attention. She never wanted a courtroom battle or international headlines. She wanted one thing, the truth about what happened to her daughter. But her pursuit of that truth built something lasting. A support fund for families who lose loved ones on cruise ships. Scholarships in Emma's name for students studying maritime safety. Partnerships with organizations that help survivors of international assault. workshops for parents who feel intimidated by legal systems larger than themselves. And every year on the anniversary of Emma's passing, Diane opens her daughter's journal, the one Emma took on the trip, and reads her words out loud. I want to see the world. I want to live in a way that makes people feel something. Emma never finished that journey, but her story made the world feel something. Something real, something undeniable. Her name became part of a movement she never lived long enough to see. There is a moment people experience after profound loss. A moment when they hope that their loved one's life, no matter how short, left a mark on the world. Diane didn't have to hope. She witnessed it. Emma's legacy lived in changed laws, in safer ships, in empowered survivors, in mothers who found their voices again, in strangers who saw her story and refused to stay silent when others faced injustice. Her life, 18 years of kindness, curiosity, and quiet strength, created a legacy built not from tragedy, but from truth. And somewhere, in a small home in Atlanta, a mother finally breathed without the weight of unanswered questions. Knowing her fight gave her daughter something no one could take away again: justice, and a legacy that carried her name farther than any ship ever could. Stories like Emma's do not fade easily. They linger in the minds of those who hear them. They raise new questions in places where silence once lived. They remind us of how fragile justice can be, and how powerful a single voice becomes when it refuses to break. For 7 years, Emma Carter was treated as a name in a report, a statistic in maritime archives, a tragedy the world was expected to forget. But tonight, you've seen what her life truly meant. A daughter who dreamed of seeing the world, a young woman who worked hard, loved deeply, and carried joy in everything she touched. A girl whose final days were stolen, but whose truth could not be buried. Her mother, a quiet school teacher from Atlanta, did what entire agencies, governments, and industries failed to do. She uncovered the truth. She connected the evidence. She faced a man the world feared, and she won. Because love can be relentless. Love can be louder than power. Love can make ordinary people do extraordinary things. And Emma's story does not end with the verdict. It continues in every law changed, every survivor who steps forward, every case reopened, and every mother who now believes her voice matters. It continues because you watched, because you listened, because her name is not forgotten. If Emma's story stayed with you, if you felt her mother's strength, if you believe truth should never be buried under wealth or fear, keep her name alive. Share this video. Tell someone what you learned today. Comment your thoughts below. Your voice helps stories like this reach the people who need them most. And if you want more deep, human-centered documentaries, stories that honor victims, expose injustice, and speak truth with compassion, please subscribe and turn on notifications. There are more stories waiting, more truths to uncover, more voices to protect. And I want you with me every step of the way. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And tonight, hold your loved ones close. We'll see you in the next case.